So this ring style is attributed to the Saxons in, I believe, the 5th or 6th century. It's the main example that I've seen, but there are several examples out there. And I spent a long time staring at the originals and kind of parsing my way around all the curly cues and everything, and I've come up with a way to make this, obviously because I made this one. I do not know if this is how the originals were made. I think so, because it works. It's actually surprisingly easy. The one thing I will say, if you're not used to using round nose pliers to make spirally circly bits like these, practice. Just cut a loose piece of wire. Actually, we're going to do that now and practice. So this is my 18 gauge craft wire from Joann's, Michael's, anywhere you can find jewelry supplies. And the main trick of these is these loops use a much smaller part of the round nose pliers than you would probably expect. So I want to work up. So grip the wire in the pliers and use your hand to make that bit. And then you want to shift the pliers to the outside of the loop, and there's our first loop. Now, our main trick is we want to keep going in the same direction. So this comes up. I shift where the plier is, and then I can actually use the pliers to move. You see that? I can move it further away. I can move them closer to each other so that they're touching. And do the same thing. Shift my pliers to the outside of the loop. And this time, instead of moving the wire, I'm actually rolling my wrist to position that loop exactly where I want it. And once it's there, then I come back in and I move the wire. So that is all it takes to, where'd my example go? To make that. You see how they're the same? And all we're gonna do is do that on two sides and then mush them together. Again, very technical terms here. You're mushing. So again, I'm gonna start with a length of, 11 inches, give or take. This ring only has a single band of wire around the back. You can double it up and you just end up with an extra vein between the leafy bits. I do not have an example of that, but I've done it. It doesn't look bad, but it does not look like the originals. So I'm going to take my wire, I'm going to hold it at the back of my mandrel. Again, mostly centered. It's okay if it's a little off, but we want about the same amount of wire to work with on both sides. And I'm going to pull it up. I'm not crossing anything. And this is just to mark where we're going to start doing those curly cues. So I'm making it straight just because it helps to see. And I'm going to take my trusty Sharpie. There we go. And holding this tight, again, I'm going to make a 7. I want to mark the bottom one on the left, and I want to figure out how long I want that wire coily bit, the decorative part, to be. and mark that distance on the second one. Can you see those marks? That's actually closer together than I want. Make another mark. We're gonna ignore that first mark. Okay, that's what I want. So now I'm gonna take it off. This one is marked down here. This one is marked up here. Now what I want to do is take my round nose pliers and for the bottom one, I'm gonna pull these apart so that I can work. I'm gonna put my pliers just past that Sharpie mark and start that curly Q motif. And I'm doing this away from this wire. There. Can you see what I see? And I'm going to press in the joint. Because I want this to be a really straight line. And now I'm going to do exactly the same thing and exactly what we did in practice, using a combination of my fingers and the pliers to manipulate the wire in this sort of curly Q fashion. There we go. There we go. So I have one side done. Now, what I want to do, I'm come back and check this. This is the other nice part about this particular method, is that if you need to move where your curly cues are to make it the right size, you can do that. You can also check this against your own finger, but be careful because the wire is starting to get really stiff, especially down here, this end that I've manipulated a lot. So I'm covering it with my fingers, but you can see to make the size that I want, I actually need to start this side right about here. That's where I want the joint where the wire crosses itself to be. So that's helpful. And we're gonna flip it over and do the exact same thing on this side. So I'm gonna put my pliers on that mark. And shift them down and pull, and you can see now that curly Q is right on that Sharpie mark. I'm going to shift my pliers down. And again, I'm doing these loops so that they point away from the first set, away from the center. And again, if you need to use a second set of pliers to give you a better grip, give you more strength, do that. It's not cheating. It's the tools that you need to do the job. And I'm coming down so I'm starting my pliers about an 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 away from the crossing point of the previous loop. But you can play with this. You can make these loops very, very big and do fewer of them. You can't make them too much smaller than this. Although I dare you and show me if you do, because this is fairly delicate. And there, I'm done. But yeah, you can really change this design a lot. Now, you see what's happening. We're gonna pull the two sides together and line them up how we want them. And then all we're gonna do is finish off these ends by wrapping it back around the side a little bit. So there we go. And it's okay if this is not perfectly round. If it's wonky, we're gonna put it back on the mandrel to form it to finish. So I want to hold, I'm sorry, because I'm covering this bit with my thumb, but that's what you want to do. You want to hold that and line it up where you want it. And then a little trick, I'm going to take my pliers and just put a kink where I want to start folding over. And pull that through the center loop. It's so funny, museum websites call that literally a hoop, this part of the ring, and I think that that is so funny, and I can't tell you why. That was just a little bit longer than I wanted to work with, so I trimmed it. And the other thing about rings that are made in this style with these terminals is that, assuming you have the length to work with, like if I had not cut that off, I could make this go around as many times as I wanted. I could effectively make the ring much smaller by doing many more of these spirally bits, because that adds thickness to your hoop. We'll use the museum word, which changes the inside diameter. So that's enough for now. And I'm just gonna come and clip this off right there and come back, push these together, and then just use the pliers to work that end down and kind of in. You want to cut it so that it's not going to scrape the skin as you put it on. Like as you literally put the ring on your finger. You don't want that cut end to be low enough that you're scraping your skin. If you do have any burrs, you can actually use an emery board. This works as well as any other sandpaper, and just come in and kind of, I'm trying to be careful to only get that end and not get the hoop, but you can come in and get any rough edges with that. Okay, let's do the other side. But you can see how it's taking form, and I actually want to just use the flat pliers and I want to put that kink, and I want to trim this a little short. Oops. And then take my pliers. Again, I'm still holding this decorative part between my thumb and my forefinger just to give it some stability and protect it while I'm doing what is fairly rough, handling of this loose end with these pliers. I would not attempt to do this with my bare hands, this part that I'm doing right now. You want the pliers to give you the control and strength and grip and literally everything. You also want to make sure that these things are really close together, these coils, just because it looks nicer that way. And get that a little further down. come back with, flush cuts are really cool because it leaves a very flat edge when you cut with this side up or facing the side that you want to be finished. I'm gonna clip that off and then take my pliers and kind of work that down. Cut that one a little short, but that's okay. And there you can see we're at like 90% done. I'm gonna stick it back on my mandrel and just use my fingernails to kind of push it down. And then I'm gonna come back. Again, this is a rubber mallet, which won't leave any dings or nicks on the metal. If you use a metal mallet, you can leave marks on the metal. And you can see how just rounding this out, we're getting much closer to the size I was shooting for. And frankly, I wear a 6 anyway, so I'm not sad that this came out a little bit smaller because this is very pretty. I kind of want to keep this one. I like to give these, nope, we're right at a 7. I really like to give these to other people who will turn around and give them to other people as largesse in the SCA. I have a few friends who are former royalty who like to keep tokens on them to give to people, and I don't mind supplying them with those tokens. These are really quick and easy to make, and yep, I'm right at a 7. I did it. Okay. And we just pull it off and we're done. Fit that finger? I'll fit that finger. So that I think is very, very pretty. And really surprisingly easy. The thing that I will say is kind of stuck on my finger. There we go. The thing that I will say is that this does work harden pretty quickly as you're manipulating these spirally bits. So just be prepared for that. Finishing it, the wire will be much stiffer than when you start out. Also, you can see I made these bits really fairly small and delicate because I was making a relatively small ring size. You can use, this is 16 gauge wire, and it was made a bit more roughly, honestly, because 16 gauge is harder to work with, because it's stiffer. But you can see how much of a difference that gauge size makes in terms of the overall appearance of the design. It ends up much beefier. And I think they're both very pretty. So that is how I make that ring.